Last Friday in January 1890, in a working street on the eastern edge of London, a woman had a birthday. Her name was Mary Jeffs. She'd given birth only weeks earlier, and she was still recovering, so most of the housework had fallen to her eldest daughter. The girl had taken it on without complaint. Everyone who knew her said the same things about her: steady, obedient, quick on an errand. Her name was Amelia Sarah Jeffs. Her family called her Millie. She was 14 years old, and she'd have turned 15 that March. At about 6:30 that evening, her mother gave her 3p and sent her out to buy a fried fish supper from a shop in Church Street. Millie took a market basket and a latchkey and stepped out into the dark. It was cold and it was damp. Her father would describe it afterwards as miserable out of doors. At the top of West Road, she ran into a neighbor's little girl, a child of 8 named Elizabeth Harmer, and told her cheerfully where she was going. Then she carried on walking. There was one thing about West Road that nobody in the family said out loud that night, because nobody had any reason to. 8 years earlier, a girl had gone missing from that street. Her name was Eliza Carter. A year before that, another one, Mary Seward. Neither of them was ever found. No body, no trace, no answer. By 1890, those disappearances had faded into the kind of thing people mention and then change the subject about. And the murders in Whitechapel 2 years earlier had taken up all the horror the East End had left in it. Millie never reached the fish shop. By 7:15, her mother said to her husband that Millie was taking a long time. Charles Jeffs finished the letter he was writing, put on his coat, and walked down to the shop. They told him she'd never been in. He spent the rest of that night going from police station to police station and from workhouse to workhouse, asking. He walked the neighborhood until 2 in the morning. He came home with nothing. In the morning, the family went to their vicar, the Reverend Canon Scott, who applied to the magistrates at the Stratford Petty Sessions and asked for publicity. Handbills went up. Her likeness went into shop windows and front windows all down the road. The police circulated her description across the whole of the metropolitan district. She was about 4 feet 6 inches tall, light hair, blue eyes, a fresh complexion, a black frock, a little ragged, a black and gray ulster, a brown and white speckled straw hat turned up at the sides and trimmed with ribbon, buttoned boots and dark stockings. Nobody had seen her. Now here's the part of this story that stayed with me since I first read it. On the Saturday morning, the day after she vanished, her father went and found the night watchman who looked after a row of new houses on Portway, a few minutes from the Jeffs' front door. They were big houses, freshly built, unsold, standing empty and waiting for tenants. Charles Jeffs asked the watchman whether any of them had been open the night before. He wanted to search them. The watchman told him which ones could be got into. One house he couldn't help with because he didn't have the key to it. So Charles Jeffs went away. 2 weeks passed. The police made what the papers called the usual inquiries and got nowhere. Then, on the 14th of February, somebody finally decided to search the empty houses on Portway. Inspector Rooks of K Division and Detective Sergeant Forth went in and started working through them. On the top floor of one house, the dust that had settled on the bare boards had been disturbed. It looked, one of them said, like there had been a struggle. The cupboard door was slightly ajar. She was inside it, lying on her left side in the corner, her knees drawn up, her scarf pulled tight around her neck. Her hat was there. Her market basket was there, on the floor beside her. She had been in that cupboard for a fortnight, a few minutes' walk from her own bed. The divisional surgeon came and made his examination and said what everyone already suspected. She'd been attacked, and then she'd been strangled with her own scarf. The house it happened in hadn't been entered, so far as anyone knew, for 3 months. The investigation that followed turned on one small, ordinary detail. And it's the detail that makes this case what it is. Her boots were clean. Behind that row of houses was open ground, a broken wooden railing, and mud. Anyone dragging a girl in from the back would have brought half a field in with them. But her boots were clean, and so the coroner put it to the jury as plainly as he could. She didn't cross that ground. She went in at the front door, and then he asked them the question that has never been answered. She was a nervous girl. Timid, her mother said. Would a nervous girl stand waiting on the front step of an empty house at night while a man she didn't know walked round the back to let her in? Or did somebody open that front door with a key? The keys were the whole of it after that. The inquest opened at the King's Head in West Ham under Mr. C. Lewis, the coroner for South Essex, and it sat 3 times across February and March. The watchman of those houses was an elderly man named Samuel Roberts. His son Joseph was the builder who'd put the terrace up. The local children called the old man Daddy Watchman, and Millie had once pointed him out to her mother in the street and used that name. Under questioning, Roberts said he'd never spoken to her. A juror asked him if he'd swear to that. He said he would. He was asked about the keys. He admitted he handed them out. Sometimes he walked people round the houses himself, and sometimes he just gave them the keys and let them go on their own. Then his account of when he'd last had them began to come apart. The foreman of the jury stood up and told him to his face that he couldn't reconcile 2 statements the man had made. On the final day of the inquest, a police inspector gave evidence that flatly contradicted him. There was more that never got explained. In the house where she was found, there was an ash walking stick with a silver band on it and initials cut into the band. They belonged to a man who left the neighborhood 3 days after Millie disappeared. And near the end, one of the jurors asked whether the police had a clue to any man who knew the girl well. The coroner said he didn't think that was a question it would be advisable to have answered. Another juror said out loud that the police were too sharp to tell them such a thing openly. No verdict named anybody. Nobody was ever charged. They buried her at the East London Cemetery. The funeral route went along Portway, past the house, and then down West Road, past her own front door. There were crowds standing at every point along the way. In May, new tenants took a 3-year lease on the house where she'd been found. And in the roof space of that house, somebody found the missing keys. Still, nobody was arrested. Then, in 1891, the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police published his annual report for the previous year. In it, Sir Edward Bradford wrote that the only capital crime unaccounted for in the whole of 1890 was the murder of the girl Amelia Jeffs at West Ham, and he wrote that the evidence against the author of the crime had been deemed insufficient to justify his arrest. The author of the crime. Not a suspect, not a person of interest. The author of the crime. A London newspaper picked that sentence apart a few months later and said the obvious thing. The police knew the man who did it. They could lay hands on him at any moment. They simply couldn't fix it on him, because under English law they couldn't question him into giving himself away, and without other evidence they were finished before they started. He was known, and he was within reach, and he was left alone. Bradford added one more line to his report. He wrote that popular suspicion had done grave injustice to an innocent person. He didn't say who the innocent person was. He didn't say who the guilty one was either. So that's where it stops. A 14-year-old girl went out for a fish supper on her mother's birthday and never came back. And the men whose job it was to find out who killed her worked out the answer, and then wrote it down in a way that told the public everything except the name. And somewhere in all of it, there's a Saturday morning in February, and a father standing in front of a locked door, asking to be let in and being told that the key had gone missing. She was on the other side of it,